Ukraine is able to keep up with Russia thanks to all the Western support. In early 2022, Ukrainians managed to halt the Russian advance toward Kyiv using their own equipment. As months passed, their arsenals deteriorated from wear and tear. NATO countries knew perfectly well that without military support, the conflict would tip in favor of the Russian side. And for that reason, help didn't take long to arrive. Some of the first to send equipment were the Czech Republic, Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland, who didn't even take a week. After a year of conflict, many countries have contributed to Ukraine. This world map represents the aid, but be cautious as sending helmets for soldiers, providing financial aid, and donating fighter jets are vastly different. Clearly, these things are not considered equal. The most interesting aspect of this map is the number of countries that haven't made any contributions. This is either because they didn't want to get involved in the conflict or because they directly support Russia. In dark blue are countries that have provided heavy military equipment like long-range anti-aircraft missiles or tanks to assist. Light blue indicates countries that have provided light military equipment such as small caliber weapons or ammunition to support the cause. Green represents countries that sent non-military supplies like medical kits and food. Yellow represents countries that contributed without delivering supplies. For example, by providing training to members of the Ukrainian army. From day one of the invasion, Putin repeatedly emphasized this point, that if NATO intervened or if Ukraine joined the alliance, things would end in nuclear conflict. The problem is that nobody knows where the line is when it comes to what is considered intervention, or at least what Russia considers intervention. For example, at the beginning of the invasion, the most powerful materials being delivered to Ukraine were short-range missiles like Manpats or anti-tank missiles like the Javelin. During the first weeks, this type of weaponry played a major role. Later, in April 2022, 2 months after the beginning, when it became clear that things were dragging on, the Czech Republic took a step forward by sending heavy weaponry in the form of T-72 tanks. Until now, it was unclear if this could trigger Moscow's nuclear button. Observing no consequences, other nations followed suit. This is indeed perilous, as it resembles a game of tug-of-war, testing Putin's word, assuming that he won't dare to press the button because of the consequences this would have. The problem is that without realizing it, the game keeps being played, and little by little, things are escalating more and more. For example, throughout 2022, Ukraine requested MiG-29 fighter jets, but no one provided them due to Putin's warning of nuclear escalation if they did. There were discussions about Poland potentially giving MiG-29s to the United States, which would then transfer them to Ukraine under the assumption that Russia wouldn't attack the United States. But at that time, things were very tense, and in the end, the fighter jets were not delivered. Months later, as time passed, the nuclear tension eased by April 2023. After a year of conflict, Poland decided to directly send Mikoyan Gurevich 29 fighter jets and Mikoyan Gurevich 24 helicopters without using the United States as an intermediary. Fortunately, there was no nuclear escalation, but if you look closely, simply because time had passed, something that once seemed inconceivable became reality. And this could lead to a day when Russia slams its fist on the table and follows through on its threats. Ukraine's military strength was based on Soviet equipment, as it was part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. That's why at the beginning they were asking for MiG-29s, because they already had pilots trained on those same planes and all the logistics were set up to operate them. The problem is that there were very few countries willing to give this model of fighter jets to Ukraine. Really, only Poland and Slovakia, and in total about 20 of these have been given between both countries. But several of these have simply been used for spare parts. The problem Ukraine faced is that after receiving these planes from Poland and Slovakia, there were no more countries willing to provide any more. As the situation prolonged, Kyiv began requesting F-16 fighters to replace their MiG-29s. The problem they encountered is that since it's an American-made aircraft, any country that wanted to help them would need approval from the United States. And at first, Biden made it clear. What's truly shocking about this conflict is that Russia hasn't been able to neutralize the Ukrainian Air Force, even though the Russian Air Force is much more powerful. Normally in these cases, like in the 2003 invasion of Iraq by the United States, the country with the better air force neutralizes the enemy and doesn't allow the other side to fly their aircraft. The enemy's infrastructure is destroyed, or their planes are shot down as soon as they take off. Russia hasn't managed to achieve this, since not only is Ukraine still carrying out missions with its aircraft, but it also keeps several air defense systems operational. Because of this, Russia probably hasn't been carrying out as many air missions as it would have liked. Because it's afraid that one of these missile batteries might shoot down one of its planes? The truth is that little by little, during the year 2022, Ukraine was losing its air defense systems. And for that reason, one of the main requests during that year was to send more of these systems. That's what ended up happening. NATO countries began providing Ukraine with Soviet equipment, which Ukrainians were already familiar with operating. But when they saw that it wasn't enough, they also decided to provide them with Western air defense systems, like Norwegian Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System, or Patriots. As expected, Ukraine is not only losing its air defense systems in battle, but they're also losing the few fighter jets they have left. For this reason, over the months, Biden's firm no to delivering F-16s has eventually turned into a yes. Because otherwise, Russia would soon take control of the Ukrainian skies. This process of delivering the F-16s to Ukraine is not something that can happen overnight. Although the F-16s haven't arrived yet, it's known that they will because the process is already underway. The first thing that needs to be done is to teach the pilots and mechanics how this aircraft operates. Notably, McCoy and Gurevich, 29 pilots must be retrained to pilot F-16s. This process takes so long because the pilots need to learn the limits of the aircraft. Let's not forget that one is of Soviet philosophy and manufacture, and the other is American. They are some of the most different things that exist. If they just wanted to learn how to fly the aircraft, it would only take them a few days. But let's not forget that they're training for the most extreme environment possible: war. A comparison could be if they gave you a car different from yours, a Chinese car that was quite different. If you can drive, you'd likely adapt within days, but not well enough to start street racing. To feel comfortable enough to do that, you'd need a lot more time. Well, it's estimated that retraining Ukrainian pilots from MiG-29S to F-16s could take about a year, more or less. The process started in early 2023, and the first F-16s are expected to be delivered by late 2023 or early 2024. Zelensky has specifically requested F-16 fighter jets, not just any fighter aircraft. Why? It's a very good fourth-generation aircraft. Many countries are using it in their air forces, which makes it highly compatible with many NATO missiles or bombs. The aircraft is also capable of ground attack missions and air-to-air combat. This would allow the aircraft to support the troops and, at the same time, defend the airspace from enemy aircraft. In addition, the F-16 is a single-engine fighter, which means it obviously only needs one engine. In a wartime situation where logistics are pushed to the limit, this is much better than using two engines. Ukraine could have requested the Swedish single-engine Saab Gripen aircraft. The problem with this is that Sweden is not in NATO, and it's NATO that's providing the most powerful equipment. However, since Sweden has applied to join the alliance, it is possible that in the coming months it will be asked to deliver some fighter jets. And since they want to join the club, they will probably end up doing it, although nothing is certain yet. The good thing for Ukraine is that the F-16s operated by European countries are already older versions. Many NATO countries are starting to replace it with the F-35, and this makes it much easier for Ukraine to request them. If you're basically going to get rid of them in a few months, you can give them to us instead of throwing them away, and with that, we can defend our territory. Something like that, more or less, is what they thought at the time in Kyiv, but they are fully aware of what they can and cannot ask for. Requesting the F-35 wouldn't have made sense, as no country would be willing to give it up, even disregarding the cost. The United States won't risk Russia shooting down and reverse engineering one of its aircraft. The NATO countries currently operating the F-16 are the United States, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. Of these, the most willing to deliver planes seem to be the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway. Wait, how Norway? They don't have F-16s. The reality is that they do have them, it's just that they're retired. In 2022, the last ones were retired to be replaced by F-35s, but currently they have about 50 stored. Negotiations are taking place among all these NATO countries to see how they can give the F-16s to Ukraine without any country losing air power. Seen on paper, it looks like a board game that apparently is almost finished. Look, the Netherlands has a few dozen F-16s that they could give to Ukraine. They are currently waiting to be replaced by F-35Zs, so if this is done quickly, the Dutch have committed to delivering about 40 F-16s. The Netherlands strongly supports Ukraine, possibly due to the downing of Malaysian Airlines MH17 in 2014, a plane that took off from the Netherlands with hundreds of Dutch people on board and was shot down by pro-Russian separatists while flying over Donbass. I made a video discussing this case, which you can find on the end screen and in the description. Denmark is willing to provide fighter jets, but only if other countries do so as well. So if the Netherlands hasn't done it before, it doesn't seem like the Danes will be the first either. Denmark, unlike its southern neighbors, is taking longer to receive the F-35S. The first unit arrived in April 2023, the same year this video is being recorded. But for now, pilots are being trained in the United States with these first F-35 units. They have said that throughout 2023 operations will begin on Danish territory, and at that time, they will start getting rid of the old F-16s. When that happens, they can start delivering the 19 planes to Ukraine. The timing is good. Around that time is when the retraining of the pilots will be completed. This is what has been finalized so far. But as a last option, there is Norway, which has a fleet of about 50 fighters that have already been retired. Out of the 50, 32 will be transferred to Romania, which also operates the F-16, the old MiG-21, a third-generation Soviet aircraft that was widely used during the Vietnam War. So the idea is to replace the old MiG-21S with Norway's F-16s. The remaining Norwegian fighter jets do seem like they could be delivered to Ukraine. Although be careful because there's a contract with an American company for their sale. So there's a possibility that the F-16s might not even make it to Ukraine. Of the other NATO countries, the one that seems most willing to help is Belgium. The problem is that it has few F-16s and the F-35SE. They are not expected to start arriving until 2025 or 2026, and until then, obviously they don't want to be left without fighter jets. What they have said is that they are going to help with the training of the pilots. So if we look at it, the F-35 is involved indirectly and unintentionally. This will determine the pace of F-16 deliveries to Ukraine. If the deliveries of the 5th generation fighter to European countries are delayed, they won't be the ones most affected. Ukraine will be. On the other hand, Poland has adopted a philosophy similar to Belgium. In this case, the Poles have already handed over MiG-29S and Mi-24 helicopters. Now they say they can't afford to give up their F-16s as well, but they will cooperate with pilot training. Surprisingly, the United Kingdom strongly supports delivering F-16 fighters to Ukraine despite not operating the F-16 themselves. But to help get this aircraft to Kyiv, they have promoted an international coalition to get other countries to give it to Ukraine. In fact, there has even been talk of the possibility that Great Britain could buy F-16s from another country and send them directly to Ukraine. Although honestly, it doesn't seem very likely that this will happen. Considering all possibilities, in the best case, the Dutch, Danish, and Norwegian planes would start being delivered. They would add up to around 50, considering that some units would be used for parts or spares. This number is close to what Kyiv is requesting recently. The question is, what would be the consequences if these 50 planes were delivered? As months pass, Russia shoots them down. Zelensky will likely continue requesting more planes. The question is, will the United States get involved and provide some of their own models? It's a fascinating question. Although it might seem impossible now, the future is uncertain. Let me remind you that it was also said that no F-16 units would be allowed to reach Ukraine. But wait, because we still haven't asked the most important question of all, will the F-16 actually be useful for Ukraine? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this video gets enough support, I'll release another one soon, analyzing this fighter jet and comparing it to what Russia has in order to answer this question. Thanks for watching. Remember, I just released the best aerospace engineering book. Subscribe if you haven't yet.